check engine lights. What are kind of our three major points here?
Three major points. My one point is sometimes you need to take it very seriously, and other times it's not as important as you think it is. That's one. And knowing the difference is that if it's blinking, it's very serious. If it's just on and your engine's performing well, then you need to look at it, but not necessarily
instantly.
The light can go on and off, and many people. One thing that many people misunderstand. A lot of people think, "Oh, I'll check my oil, I'll check my coolant." It's not for that. It's the primary purpose of the check engine light is actually to warn you that there's an emission, that there's a failure in the vehicle's computer operating system, basically, that would cause exhaust emissions to be higher than usual. It's not really there as a diagnostic tool, although it is, but that's really the primary reason they put it in there, especially since 1996 when they introduced what's called OBD2. It's like it basically means the car can self-diagnose itself for emission failures. That's really the primary reason for it.
So what are some of the things that a check engine light can indicate?
Well, it can indicate everything. On the very simplest side of things, it can indicate, well, I'll just say generally, I mean, it can indicate anything from an engine running rough, which would be a misfire. There's some sort of valve timing issue. It can indicate that your fuel cap is loose, or there's a leak in the fuel evaporative emission system. So there's a system that's to capture gasoline vapors from escaping to the atmosphere. And if there's any leak in that system, that'll cause the light to come on. There are also certain vehicles that have like air pumps that pump air into the exhaust system to reduce emissions. Just when the engine's cold. A lot of European cars do that. If that fails, the light comes on. It doesn't affect your performance in any way. The catalytic converter is monitored, and that's a big thing that can cause a light. If the catalytic converter is not functioning properly, it's old or something's happened, then it'll cause the light to come on. What else? Transmission not shifting properly too. This is kind of a weird thing. You think, well, what does a transmission have to do with an engine? Well, if it doesn't shift right, according to the way the manufacturer's programmed it, if they deem that the emissions may be too high because of it, it'll actually cause that light to come on. So those are just some of the things.
And what's the difference when the check engine light is blinking? What is that indicating, and what are some of the causes of that happening?
Yeah. So the blinking check engine light is the most important thing to follow, and that is the blinking check engine light means there's a catalyst damaging misfire event happening. And so what that means basically is if an engine misfires, so that's the engine, essentially what you'll feel is the engine's rough. So you go to accelerate and the car's shaky when you accelerate, or it doesn't have the power that you expect it to have.
It doesn't sound right either.
It doesn't sound right. It's like a bub, 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 bub kind of sound, instead of just a smooth, when you accelerate. So that's my little way of trying to describe it. But so if that occurs, what's happening is some of the combustion process in your engine cylinders is not occurring properly. It usually dumps raw gas into the exhaust system, and that causes the catalytic converter to heat tremendously, and that'll damage the catalytic converter. And I will say this happens very quickly. I had a Subaru that had it had a slight misfire, and it would only happen at certain speeds. It wasn't huge. It was very tricky to diagnose and find. And I'll be honest, being a mechanic, sometimes I'm a little lazy with my own car. If it keeps going, I'm just happier to fix other people's cars and make a living than sometimes fix my own. But interestingly enough, when I finally found the problem, and it wasn't severe, but I finally found the problem and fixed it. Sure enough, 6 months later, the check engine light came on, catalyst damaged, misfire. So it happens fast, it happens quick. And I'm just using that as an example, but I've seen many other vehicles where you really want to fix that one fast, because catalytic converters are very expensive to fix.
And what kind of price range are they typically?
Well, I mean, on a cheap end, maybe $1,000. Yeah, I mean, maybe $500 on an older model with a separate catalytic converter, but they can be up into like several thousand, $3,000-$4,000.
And that's why people are actually crawling under cars and cutting them off cars and cycling them, because they can make that much money off.
Well, there, I would say before anyone gets any ideas, they're on a scrap metal basis. The value tends to go up and down, but they have precious metals in them: platinum, palladium, rhodium, and they can use a variety of those metals depending on pricing and so on. But they're, yeah, they can be. I mean, and scrap value is probably the best I've ever got when prices of catalytic converters were high. It was maybe $150, but you know, for someone, you know, it's a you can hacksaw a converter out and get a, you know, quick 50 or $100. It's not a bad thing, but the price of these things goes up and down depending on the scrap metal market.
And there's a better way to make a living.
Yes, thank you, Mark. That is absolutely true. So we're not putting that out to anybody, but just so you know, that does happen. I had that happen to a friend who lived near my shop in an industrial complex, and it was in an area where there's really no activity going on, right next to a bridge, and there's a fence nearby. And one morning he gets up, starts up his Mazda minivan. It's like super loud, brings it in, and go, someone cut his catalytic converter out in the middle of the night with a Sawzall. Great people out there. Anyways, we digressed.
Check engine lights. What about, like, here's a story. My father had an older Dodge minivan. Not trying to pick on Dodge, but this is the story. And he kept having an intermittent check engine light thing that you guys diagnosed more than once, and we're unable to find the problem. So what's going on with that? What do you speculate?
Well,
your experience. So
here's what I'll say about the check engine lights is first of all, every time the light comes on, it'll set a trouble code in the vehicle system. So it'll store that trouble code for a certain number of drive cycles. So sometimes the light will come on, then the vehicle's detected a problem, then it'll go out, and that's kind of what you're talking about with your dad's vehicle. And so that's kind of a normal process. Like sometimes I'll just say, like, the catalytic, there's one, it's a P0420, which is a catalyst. Okay, I'm lost for words. It indicates the catalytic converter is not performing up to spec. And so what can happen is that the check engine light can come on for that, but the vehicle's always retesting everything. It's looking at it, and sometimes after, say, 2 or 3 drive cycles, if the issue is below the threshold of what's going to cause that light to come on, it'll actually turn the light off. But it'll normally store that information, at least the trouble code, in the vehicle computer for, say, 50 drive cycles. If it doesn't happen again, then the light won't come back on, or it'll come back on, but the information will be gone. So it can be kind of frustrating, you know, with check engine lights that come on and go off and come on and go off. But the best thing to do is to bring it in, at least have it looked at, and have a discussion with your service provider, someone you trust, you know, and get some good information. I mean, there's a lot of places that, you know, they'll say, hey, you got to fix this because you have to. And it's like, you don't necessarily have to. It's really about having a discussion and see what you think. But I mean, ideally in a car, it's best to have no warning lights on, because then, you know, everything's working properly. You're putting out the least amount of pollution. You're not going to cause any damage to the car. But there are things that, you know, depending on your budget, do you need to fix it this week? No, you might be able to leave it for a week or 2 or a month so you can afford it.
So I think the big takeaway that I have from this is that my check engine light has really nothing to do with my oil. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. No, well, okay, not always, but most of the time. But I do. So we do have a number of people who come into our shop. People are concerned, and this is good. You know, you need to be, you know, you need to be concerned. People are like, oh, my check engine light came on. I pulled over right away, and I checked my oil, and I checked my coolant, and it's all full. Well, the check engine light doesn't come on normally because your engine oil level is low. However, there are times where low oil level, and I'm thinking like Honda products, for instance, they use variable valve timing system, and that uses oil pressure. And if your oil level is low, and it can't, you know, feed the right amount of oil at the right pressure to the variable valve system, that'll cause a variable valve timing code to come on. So checking your oil is a good thing. Do you need to pull over right away and check it? No, it's not. Remember, the check engine light is an orange warning light, not a red one. Red ones mean like you need to take immediate action. Most of them, I think it's funny, like an airbag light, they're often red. I'm going, well, do you need to take immediate action? I mean, the airbag's only important if you get in a collision. So you really don't need to pull the vehicle over. But I'm just going to say for engine lights, you know, like a coolant warning light or a an oil warning light, those are like immediate action red warning lights. If it's an amber light, it's not, it's a take action soon. Although I think with the check engine light, if there's a misfire, it almost should have a red component, but it doesn't. So
it blinks.
The blinking is the red part. But yeah, you know, I mean, it's good to check your oil and it's good to check your, you know, coolant and that kind of thing. But really, the most important thing I would say with your check engine light, if you've been driving your car for a long time, all of a sudden the light comes on, make an appointment, have your service provider, your mechanic, someone you trust, look at it and see what the information, you know, see what they can get out of it and get some trusted recommendations.
Would it be worth having them show you the trouble codes that are stored, just so you know, have a little bit of confidence in what they're telling you?
Sure. I mean, the other thing you can do, and that you can buy a code reader. You can even buy these apps.
Okay, we're not going to go into that.
We're not going to go into apps.
Not,
okay,
not this time.
Okay, you can buy a code reader though and plug it in. You know, but
well,
yes.
if you've taken into the service, my point is you take it into the service provider, get them to show you what the trouble codes are. If you don't know, if you're not 100% sure that they're giving you the right information, or you want to check it, or it's just your nature that you want to be precise about these things, why not get them to show you what the trouble codes are?
Yeah,
and explain
any
what they
service
are.
provider should do that.
Yeah.
And I mean, we always do that. It's like you have this code, that code, and sometimes you'll have several. And if the other thing, usually you don't get, you know, if the light has just come on, you don't usually get 5. If you get like 5 trouble codes, they're probably all related to the same thing. But you know, if you've been neglecting it for a while and it's been on for 6 months or a year or maybe even a couple of years, and you go, I think I'll get that looked at, and then someone says, hey, you got 5 different things, you know, you need to, you know, there needs to be a discussion of how you're going to strategically deal with that. So yeah, you need to know that, you know, what the codes are, what they're related to. I mean, any service advisor or mechanic should be able to tell you these are the codes. This is why it's happening. These are the tests and diagnosis we need to do. By the way,
we're wandering a little bit off topic, but again, those codes are just indicators for you as the service, or for the service provider, to start the diagnostic process to find out what the issue is. They don't tell them exactly what the issue is in most cases.
Exactly. And a lot of codes will say, for instance, oxygen sensor circuit. It doesn't mean that the oxygen sensor is bad. It just means that there's a problem in that circuit. There are often common things that cause problems, but just because it says this particular code does not mean that it is that particular item. That's a very big misunderstanding, and people think if I just know what the code is, I'll just go buy the part and I'll fix it. And you might get lucky. You could also be wasting a lot of money.
Yeah. Cars are smart, but they're not that smart.
Yeah, exactly. And then there is an illusion that, you know, everything's plug in. Oh, I can just go in and plug in and it'll just diagnose everything. No, that's not the case. You know,
and that's one of the reasons why check engine lights can be a really frustrating experience for people. And I'm sure everyone who's got a car has had a check engine light come on.
Yeah. Sooner or later, it'll come on for something. And, you know, there again, I don't know if we've talked about this yet, but what does it cost? You know, people, I just saw an article, you know, on the internet. What is it? Here's a breakdown of what the average cost to fix a check engine light. Well, it's like calling a dentist going, my tooth is aching. How much does it cost? It's like, it could be anywhere from a checkup saying, hey, floss your teeth more often, it'll be gone, to, you know, $5,000, you know, root canal or whatever, you know, tooth extract. I don't, you know, like it could be pretty serious. So the thing is with a car's check engine light, same thing. It could be anything, you know, the very easy end, the gas cap could be loose. That does happen. Or, you know, it could be a set of catalytic converters for several $1,000s. So there's, you know, there's your price range, and it depends on the car and the make and the model and how it's designed.
So there you go. Check engine lights. Done.